Hey folks, in today's video we are going to be building a dashboard. So we are going to be using many of the skills that I've been touching on in my previous videos to build a time series environment to explore a set of data. So what we're going to be accomplishing today is building a four menu drop down dashboard that will enable you to filter by uh, markets, names in the market, time series. So you can see we're moving up and down with our time series, and you'll have this dynamic chart over here that will let you look through the data. Additionally, we're going to be using Google Apps Script in order to reset our dashboard so that when we switch between markets, we don't have disruption, and we have the ability for our stakeholders to move through our environment effortlessly and get the answers to what they need to know. So for this tutorial, you are going to need to know the Google Sheets query function, basic lookups, and we are going to use Google Apps Script. We're going to just briefly move through that, but it will be something that we go over today. So we're going to begin this from what I believe to be best practice. So we're going to treat this as if somebody just came to us with this request or we had the idea for it. So what I would recommend doing is going to your Google Drive and creating a new project folder. So we're going to call this dashboard build number 1. And we're going to create a project folder. I highly recommend doing this because you're going to want to stay organized with all of the materials that you pull in. And I've found this to be a very helpful tool. Additionally, I would recommend documenting all of the things that you do in here. So in addition to creating a spreadsheet, I would recommend creating a text document where you can write down who, what, when, where, why, and how about what you're doing in here. Because the further you get away from it, the less you're going to remember about it. And as much as I love having you watch my videos, I want you to be empowered to be able to do this stuff on your own so that you can be creative and dynamic and all of that stuff. Cool. So with that out of the way, what we're going to do is we are going to open up a brand new spreadsheet, and we are going to begin by collecting our data. So I have the data in a workbook conveniently called data, and I'm going to be making this data available to you in the description below so that you can follow along with the tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I use keyboard shortcuts. I'm on a Mac. If you're not on a Mac, I'm sorry, but I would recommend looking up the keyboard shortcuts for Mac because I find it to just be more efficient. So on my Mac, I'm going to hold down Control, Option, and F to open up the File menu. I am going to hit D in order to go into the Download menu, and then I'm going to hit C to extract a CSV. There are many ways to import data, but given that this is a beginner build, we are going to be manually extracting the data from our source. What I'm going to do now is hit Control Option F to open up my File menu. I am going to hit I so that I can import it. I am going to hit Tab once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and now I'm in my menu. I'm going to hit the left arrow to go to Upload. I'm going to hit Tab one more time to go to Browse, hit Enter. I'm in my Downloads folder. I'm going to hit Open. I'm going to hit Tab once, twice to get to my import location, and I'm going to replace the current sheet. I'm going to hit Tab 3 times and then import my data. Cool. So now I have my data set in my environment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So I am going to hit Shift and the space bar, and then I am going to hit Command B so that I have bold headings so that those stand out to me. I'm going to hold down Control Option V. I'm going to open up the View menu. I'm then going to hit R so that I can freeze the range, and I am going to do O because I want the first row. I'm going to hit the right arrow, and then I'm going to hit Command right, right arrow, I'm going to hit Control Spacebar, Shift Command right arrow, right click on my range and delete columns G through Z because I do not need them. Tip: Google Sheets does limit the amount of total cells that you can have in your workbook. You can have a lot of cells in here, but for me personally, I like to be very efficient with the usage of my cells. So when I have a range that does not require columns or rows, I remove them so that I can keep my cell number in check. Cool, so now that I have my freeze in here, you can see I can scroll up and down the data set, and I have this frozen row up here so that I will never forget what each of my columns is doing. I am going to hit Shift Option S, which will open up the tab menu. I am going to hit the down arrow and go to rename, and I am going to rename this data. I am going to do, and you can name this whatever you want to, by the way. This is just me keeping it basic so that we can move along. I'm going to do Shift Option S again, and I'm going to hit down arrow to go to change color. I like to color coordinate my sheets, so when I label something red, it means if you delete this, you will delete the ability for this workbook to run. So I recommend using color coordination, but you can do whatever you want to here. You can use any tabs that you want to. Now that we have our data in place, I am going to hold down the FN key, which is at the bottom left-hand corner of my keyboard. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and then I am going to hit F11 all at the same time, and that's going to create a new tab in my workbook. I'm going to hold down Option, I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to hit S so that I can open up the sheet menu again, and I'm going to hit Rename, and I'm going to call this Data. I was going to call it Explorer. I'm going to call it Data Scope. Now, Data Scope is a sheet that I have recently started doing, and it's meant as a way to provide a scope of understanding about the data that you're working with, right? So if we go back into this data tab in here, we have a country dimension, we have a name dimension, we have a time series dimension, and then we have metrics in here. I want people to understand what the start date of our time series is and what the end date of our time series is. I want them to know every name that they have available in here, and I want them to know every country they have in here. That way, they have a visual representation of this, and it's available to them in perpetuity after I provide it to them. So what I'm going to do is I am going to type in start date, end date. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit min for the month, and then I am going to reformat this column to be, let's do it as a date. So we'll say the start date is January 1st, 2019, and then we're going to do max, and we're going to go in here, and then we're going to do 12/1/2022. Cool. So I am then going to resize this column to be 6 because I want a delineation in here. I like using keyboard shortcuts, as you can tell. And if I have just a blank column in here, I can hold down Command and I can move around my data set like this to kind of jump around. Cool. So now that we have that in there, I am going to use unique query. I'm going to go to my data tab. I'm going to highlight the entire range. And then I am going to select A, where A is not null. And I am going to order by A. And I'm going to do double quote, comma 1, hit enter. And now you can see I have all the countries in my data set. Cool. So now I'm going to do control space bar. And then I'm going to resize my column to 6. And then I don't need to retype this because I'm pretty much going to do the same thing for each column in there. So I'm going to paste in my unique query. And instead of doing A, I'm going to do B. And now we have all of our names. And I'm going to do that. And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this down one. And then I'm going to like break a best practice here, but I don't really care. I'm going to say time range. And then I'm going to do bold, Control Option V, R, O, and now I have this thing in here, and now we can scroll up and down like that. Cool. Now I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to resize column G to 6, and then actually we don't even have to do that, do we? Right? Cool. Yeah, we don't have to do that because we have all of our countries, we have all of our names, we have our minimum start date and our maximum start date. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I leave like 3 blank columns in there just in case I need to add something else in there. And then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to cap this off at 40. You know, you might want to give a little bit more room, you know, depending upon like if your data has a live feed to it, if it's going to continue to expand, because you might have like more names go past 40. But because this is a contained environment, I'm going to keep it at 40, keep it nice and clean like this. I'll leave it up to you. It's really a preference of like, you can let this go. You don't have to cut down on columns and rows and all that type of stuff. But I do like to do that. So I'm going to highlight this is green just so that we know that that's the scope. And now what we're going to do is start building out our data set. So I'm going to do FN Shift F11. And, you know, I have a vision of what I wanted to achieve here. This build is what I will use in my, you know, 9 to 5. For you, you know, when you think about how to approach this, you might want to sketch it out first, you know, so that you have a sense of where everything is going to go and how you want the layout to be and everything. I'm going to show you how I approach it. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's really about what works best for you. Because I know that I want to have menus in here and I want to have some like spacing elements where I'm going to resize columns and rows to clean it up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start in B4. And in B4, I'm going to establish my base query. So I'm going to go to my data set and I am going to select column C because I want the time series in there. I want some D, I want some E, and I want some F. And I'm going to say in my where C is not null, because if it doesn't have a month or time, then I don't want to pull it in there. I'm going to group by C. I'm going to order by C descending. I am going to limit to 25 because I want 2 years worth of data. Okay, so basically it's going to be 12 months from whatever my start date is. I want 25, and I want it in reverse chronological order. So I want the most recent month first, followed by whatever the not most recent month is. I'm going to label some D as inventory. I'm going to label some E as gross revenue. And I'm going to label some F as net revenue. And then I want to format column C in month, year formatting. Cool. So I'm going to hit enter now. And now you can see I have all of that data in here. And now this is going to give me kind of a foundation to scope. So I'm now going to add in what will end up being our drop-down menus. Yeah, you know what, we'll call it month and year. I always struggle with what to call these time series things. Typically I work in like month and year or year. But basically it's just like whatever your time period is. So I'm going to plug in December 2022. And what we're going to do now is start kind of sculpting this breakout in here. So in addition to where C is not null, I'm going to say and C is less than or equal to, and I am going to have to use a cell reference. So I'm going to reference cell G2 in order to get what my month limit is. So basically this is going to enable us to put a ceiling on this thing so that we can go back in time if we want to, right? So like we know from our data scope that December 2022 is the maximum date and that January 1st, 2019 is the minimum date. So if you want to, it's going to give you the last 25 months at a particular start date. So if you want to go back to August 2022 or July 2019, you'll have the ability to do so. And we're going to use cell G2 in order to accomplish that. So we're going to say C is less than or equal to date because we have to tell the computer that we're referencing a date. And anytime we're using date, it has to be a string. So we're going to add a single quote in there. And effectively what we're going to do, and I have a video that breaks this down further, so I'm not going to go super deep into it, but basically we need to format it like this. So what we're going to do when we reference our cell, we're going to do a double quote, ampersand G2, ampersand double quote, single quote. And then you'll see we have an error in here. And the reason that we have an error in here is that G2 converts to a date value. So we're going to have to use a text function so that we can reformat it into the correct 4 Ys, 2 Ms, 2 D formatting. And now you can see this is going to work. And what we have the ability to do now is we can start typing in any month and date in here. And you can see that it enables us to change the range that we're looking at. So my preference, in addition to providing the month time series, is also to include the year totals. That way people can see very quickly at a glance like how the full year is comparing to previous years. So what we're going to do is, as part of kind of like showing you what I do, is I'm going to separate things so that we can blend them together. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the year on top of the months. But before we do that, I'm going to go over here and work through it so that you can see how things, like how you can kind of massage things. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the year operator, and we are going to adjust C to be like this. Actually, I don't know if we have to do it there. We're going to change our group by to year. And apologies if I fumble around a little bit. Sometimes it's like I remember what to do, but I don't always remember what to do. So we have to get rid of this format because we're no longer doing that month, year thing. So what we did basically is we took all of our, when we selected C before, we're changing that to year C. So what query will do for us is it will just strip out the month and it will give us like 2022 or 2021, 2020, so on and so forth. And then it will aggregate our metrics against the year. And then what we should do is change this from 25 because we don't want 25 years in there. I'm just going to limit to 3. And when I hit enter, what we should see is cool. So now what you'll see is like we're in December, so we have this inventory number. If we change it to October, you can see that then this adjusts over here. So I'm also going to add year C to our label by, and I'm going to call it month. I know this isn't the best name for it. We can change it up. I don't, whatever. I just want these two to be consistent, right? So now that I have this, I'm going to copy it. I'm going to delete it. You don't have to delete it until you put it in, but what we're going to do now is we're going to use an array. So we're going to use a curly bracket, and we're going to paste the year function, or the year quote-unquote code in there. And we're going to use a semicolon, and then that will enable us to stack it on top of the month time series. And then I'm going to add in a curly brace at the bottom. And now what you'll see is we have this nice little stack here, so that when we change, oops, I should probably spell it correctly. When we change that in there, you'll see we now have this dynamic thing up here. So then if we change it to December 2019, you can see that it dynamically changes really nicely, and it's just cool stuff to do that, will empower you to visualize data really quickly. Cool. So now what we're going to do is we are going to add in these month selectors up here. So right now it's filtered to all and name is all. But what we are going to want to do is we're going to want to add in like United States and then a person's name in here. And then we're going to want to be able to change it back to all. And then if we want to change this to all and just kind of like explore the data, right? That's the way I think about this time series sheet or view, is that it's an Explorer tab. It's a data Explorer tab so that you can get hands-on and quickly move through your information, or you can give it to other people so that they can quickly move through it. So, in previous videos and instances, even, when we were doing it with this like high level time limiter, is we hard code into the query and column equals variable. We don't want to do that here because all is not a variable, right? So like all is not a name in our data set. All is a thing that we're defining outside of the data set by not defining what name we want to search for or what month we want to search for. So we're going to nest some functions within our where statement. And again, in order to show you what we're doing, we're going to do it over here, and then we're going to move the code into the query so that it will dynamically do what we want it to do. So we're going to begin with our month conditional, and then we're going to do our name conditional, and then we're going to join them together. So in our month conditional, I'm going to expand this just a little bit. We're going to use an if statement, and we're going to say if C2 equals all, then give us nothing, right? So that's the symbol for null. When you have two double quotes or two single quotes next to each other, that's how you tell the computer null. That means nothing. If it is not, then we're going to do a double quote, and because we're doing month, or sorry, that should be market. Just caught that, my apologies. But we'll say and A equals, and then we're going to do single quote, double quote, ampersand. C2, ampersand, double quote, single quote, double quote to close the if, hit enter. And now you can see we have nothing in there because it says all. But check out what happens when we change it to anything that is not all. We get and A equals United States. Cool. So I'm going to change this to market. My apologies again. So then we go to change this here. So that's just nice and clean. Cool. So then we're going to go to our name conditional. And we're going to do nearly the same thing, right? So we're going to do if E2 equals, all, give us null. If not, give us and B. Oh, God, sorry. B equals single quote, double quote, ampersand, E2, ampersand, double quote, single quote, double quote to close out the text of the if statement, hit enter, and you can see we have nothing there because it says all, and then let's change it to a name, and now you can see we have and A equals United States, and B equals Dan. Cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use join. So we're going to hit equal sign, do join, and our delimiter is going to be just a space, right? So this is different than null in that space is a character. So we are going to join together our market conditional and our name conditional, and we're going to separate them by a space. We're going to do a comma. And what we're going to do to just kind of begin with is we're going to select H4. Then we're going to do a comma, and we're going to select H5, and we're going to hit enter, and now you can see we have and A equals United States and B equals Dan. If we go up here and we change United States to all, you can see we just have and Dan. If we change Dan to all, you can see we have nothing. If we change this to United States, you can see we have and A equals United States, and then let's change it to another name. Let's do Hallie, and B equals Hallie. What we're going to do now is we're going to remove these cell references because we don't want to keep H4 and H5 here, right? In our end visualization, people don't care that we're doing this. They just care that it works. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hit enter. We're going to copy everything except for the equal sign. We're going to hit enter again. We're going to go into our join. We're going to delete H4 and we're going to paste in our if statement. And check it out. It's still working as if we were referencing the cell. So we're going to type in United States just so that we can see stuff. And now we're going to go to H5, do the same thing. We are going to highlight the entire if statement, copy it, go into our join statement, delete H5, enter in that, and check it out. Now we can delete market conditional and name conditional, and we have our cell still functioning dynamically exactly as we want it to. So now what we're going to do is we are going to copy that join code, right? Everything except for the equal sign. We're going to hit enter. We're going to go into B4. Within B4, we are going to add that code block into our where statements for both queries. So we're going to do a double quote, an ampersand. We're going to hit Command Enter, Command V, Command Enter, ampersand, double quote. We're going to highlight that code block now, and we're going to go down, and we are going to paste it into our second code block. We're going to hit enter, and now you can see we're only looking at Hallie, right? So if we change it to all, we're looking at everything. If we change it to United States, we're looking at everything. If we change this to November 2021, we're looking at November 2021. We can add in the name Matt. Matt is not part of the United States, so he doesn't come up. If we change it to all, we now get Matt in there. We can get Dan in there. Dan isn't in our data set. Sorry, Dan. Add in Hallie, but we'll spell it right. Add in Hallie, or we do all, and we're back to our starting point, right? So you can see we now have a dynamic menu of options so that we can explore our data. Now, obviously, as we mentioned, right, when we look at Matt, we get results, but when we add in United States, we don't get results. And the reason that we don't get results is because Matt does not have any line items with the market of United States. This is a problem that we are going to want to solve when we provide our end users this environment. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But for now, we are going to add in menu selectors so that people don't have to type in things, right? So we're going to create like a dynamic drop-down menu that has all of the market options, and then we're going to set it up so that the names respond to the market that is selected. That way, if somebody selects United States, Matt will not show up as an option within the name menu. Additionally, we're going to add in like a month and year drop-down menu. So what we're going to do first is we're going to hit Shift Option S, and we're going to rename Sheet 3, and we're going to call it Dashboard. Now, as you build this out, like if you build in multiple views in here, you're going to want to have more specificity than just calling it a dashboard. But for the purposes of our exercise, we're just going to call it that. An alternative name that you might want to have is like summary, or time series summary, or time series, something like that, that explains what the view accomplishes so that when people see it, they instinctively understand what you're attempting to accomplish. Cool. So I'm also going to move it to the front of my workbook. I'm going to hold down Shift, FN, F11, and that's going to create me a new tab. What I'm going to do is very similar to our data scope. I'm going to do equal sign, unique. I'm going to do query. I'm going to go to my data set. I'm going to select the entirety of the data set, and then I am just going to select the column that I want, right? So I'm going to say where A is not null because I don't want any null values, and then I'm going to order by A because I want this alphabetized, right? And I'm going to hit enter. Now the challenge is that country is not a value in our data set, right? So if we have this here and people pick country, it's not going to do anything. It's going to error out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a label, and I'm going to label A, and then I'm going to just label it nothing. Cool. So now we have the 3 countries. Now, in addition to the countries, we also have the all potential, right? So we're going to add in a curly bracket. We're going to do double quote, capital A, lowercase ll, double quote, line break, semicolon, line break, curly bracket. Now we have all Canada, UK, and United States. Cool. I'm going to resize column B, and then I am going to copy my code block, and I am going to change all of the A's to B. Cool. So now we have every name in here. Now, the problem that we're running into, though, is that if we add these names into our menu items, we will still have that option to select United States and Matt at the same time. So we need to add in some type of filtration that allows us to dynamically change these names based upon what menu item is selected. Additionally, we need to ensure that we have the ability to have all of these names, because when all is selected, all of these can be filtered, right? We could have all as the market, and we could look at Matt. We could have United States as the market, and we could look at Hallie. But we could not have United States and Matt, because Matt doesn't have any values for the United States. So we are going to add in a conditional in here. We are going to copy our code block here. You know what? We're going to copy all of this, and we're going to say if dashboard exclamation point, I think it's C2, equals all, then we're going to do that version of the query where it's just all names. If it is not all, we are going to say where B is not null and A equals single quote, double quote, ampersand, dashboard, exclamation point, C2, ampersand, double quote, single quote. And what this should do then is it should filter all of the names based upon the value in C2. So let's cross our fingers and hope this works. Cool, that works, right? So let's go back to our dashboard, and we're going to change this to be United States. And what we hope to see in sheet 4 is a list of names that align with the United States. And my apologies, I said before that you could do United States and Hallie. Turns out you can't. So now what will happen is when people select the United States, these names will populate the dashboard menu in E2. So the last thing that we're going to do is we are going to go into D2, and we actually don't need the curly brackets and the all. We are going to change A. Oh, actually, sorry. I'm going to rechange this. We're going to resize column D to 6. Then we're going to paste it in. We don't need all of this. We're going to change A to C. And then we're going to remove that curly bracket. We're going to hit enter. And now we have each of the months. And I'm going to change that order by to descending. And then I'm also going to add in a format that will format C as a more readable version of month and year. I'm going to resize this. I'm going to keep 3 columns on the end. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do it like that. And I'm going to keep 2 columns on the end. I'm going to delete all these excessive columns. And then I'm going to go down here. I'm going to go to row 100. And I'm going to then delete all these rows down here because I don't want all that excess stuff in here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit Option Shift S, and I'm going to rename it as Menu Items. And I am going to change the color to black. That's my preference for like my menus, is to like have them be black so I know that they're like serving a function within the spreadsheet. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add all of these in there. So I'm going to call this all, and I'm going to go to the data tab. I'm going to go to data validation. I'm going to add a rule. I'm going to change the criteria from drop down to drop down from a range. I'm going to select data range. I'm going to go to my menu items. I'm going to select all of column A, so you can see I'm referencing A through A. I'm going to go to advanced options. This is just my preference. I like the error better than the chip. So I'm going to do that, and then we go back in here, and now you can see that we have all of those options available, and it's dynamically changing our data set down here. So I'm going to click over to E2. I'm going to add another rule. Same thing, drop down from a range, select data range, put my cursor in the selection box, and then I'm going to select column C. I'm going to select all of it, hit OK, go to advanced options. I prefer arrow. I'm going to go back to my data range, and now you can see that we can filter by every single name in here. Cool. And then we're going to go into G2. We're going to add a rule. Same thing, third time's the charm. We're going to go in here. We're going to do our select data range. Click into select data range. Select E through E. Scroll down to advanced options. Change it to an arrow. Select done. Go back to dashboard. Resize this a little bit. Unfortunately, this shows up in like kind of a gnarly way, but you know, I think it's fine. So then you can like just filter through all your stuff in here. Cool. So now we are going to add in that dynamic chart. So we're going to create a new menu item up here called chart selector. And within our menu items, we are going to use the transpose function to select our three headers here. And then we're going to go back to our dashboard, and we're going to add in another drop down. And we are going to add a rule, drop down from range, select the data range, go back to our menu items, select column G, hit OK, advanced options, go to arrow, hit done, close out the data validation rules, go up here, and now we have a nice little way for us to, let's resize that, select names. Cool. Now we have to build the logic for that. So we are going to hold down Shift, Fn, F11, open up a new tab, and we're going to call it Menu Slicer. And what we're going to do is we are going to go into B4, and we're going to go into our time series query for the month and year, and we're going to highlight all of that, right? And we're going to copy it, hit escape, go to our menu slicer, hit enter in A1, add in an equal sign if you didn't capture it, hit enter. Now this isn't working because I hit enter too quickly, and you can see instead of referencing the menus on the dashboard tab, we're actually referencing G2 in the menu slicer tab. So we just have to define that we want to go to the dashboard tab. We can copy it, paste, 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 paste. And when we hit enter, we get the data in here. So now this is connected to our dashboard tab. So I'm going to resize our column to be 6. And then I'm going to use my transpose to get those names again. And what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to build a little index. So inventory is in column B, or rather this is a dictionary. I'm going to build in, I'm going to type in C for revenue, gross revenue, and D for net revenue. And then I'm going to resize column H. And now I'm going to create a dynamic query of columns A through D in the menu slicer tab. So I'm going to select column A because I always want the month. And then I'm going to use a double quote, an ampersand, and I'm going to do if error, VLOOKUP, and I am going to look up against column I2 in the dashboard tab, and I am going to look up the value in columns F through G, and I'm going to return the second column, so this letter over here, and I'm going to do false, close the parentheses, ampersand, double quote, and I'm going to say where A is not null, and I'm going to do double quote, comma 1, and then check it out. I now have the ability to dynamically query this data set over here because I'm using a lookup and a cell reference in order to pull from the dictionary that I have in columns F through G that identifies that I have 3 columns. Inventory is in column B, gross revenue is in column C, and net revenue is in column D. So if I go to my dashboard tab and I select gross revenue and I go to my menu slicer, you can see that's now the value that's being populated in there. So I'm going to delete all these excess columns in here. I'm going to resize column K to be 6. I'm going to go down, and I don't need anything under row 30. I mean, really, I don't need anything after row 26 because I'm never going to go over 25 months because I want 2 full years. And now I have the ability to insert a column into my data set. Or sorry, not a column, a chart. So I'm going to go up into insert. I'm going to do chart. It's probably going to pull in the data from over here, which I don't really want. So what I'm going to do now is delete my data range. And then I'm going to have to remove this, that stuff in there. So cool. So now I'm going to move this over here and I'm going to put it kind of close to my data set. And I'm going to go to my date range, and then I'm going to go to menu slicer. I'm going to scooch this over a little bit. I'm going to select I through J. I'm going to hit OK. And then for my x-axis, I am going to do column I. And then for my data series, I'm going to do column J. And I am going to treat the labels as text. So you can kind of see that we're getting like this gnarly, like we're only getting, it's not gnarly, but we're only getting like July to January to July to January. I personally like to see it like this. Then you can see it's going in reverse chron to, you know, it's basically going back in time. I don't want it to do that, so what I'm going to do is double click on these labels. I'm going to reverse the access order so that now it's moving from in chronological order left to right. I'm also going to take my series and I'm going to add a point size to it so it's a little bit more pronounced. And over in my slicer tab, I am going to turn these into numbers. Obviously, revenue and net revenue and inventory are kind of like mixed data types, you know? So it's like my bad for making a fake data set that isn't like really, isn't very practical. But now what you have in here is you have a consistent like numerical representation on the left side of your chart. And when you flip through, you have it dynamically adjust to the data set that you're flipping through. And the cool thing about this now is that it will dynamically respond to, like, if you have United States and then you have EMEA in here, you'll see that you can filter through all of EMEA's metrics and see how they differ compared to, you know, if you did everything all at once. Cool. So another thing that I'm going to do in here is I'm going to go to chart style. This is just my personal preference. I'm going to remove the border. That way, it'll like just kind of sit in the background of my data set. So we're going to also change the color here to red because I want people to know that, like, if this breaks, then they won't, their environment won't work anymore. And now we're going to do some cleanup stuff in here. So we're going to do some stylization. So I like to resize my columns so that they all align with one another. So I'm going to highlight B through E, and I'm going to do Shift and click so that I can highlight all of them at once. I'm going to resize these columns, and I'm going to resize them to 125. And then I'm going to highlight these columns over here, and I'm going to resize them to 150. And the reason I did 150 is kind of arbitrary. I like to have that like equidistant spatial relationship so that people can see things and so that everything kind of like locks into one another. Again, this is all your preference. You can do whatever you want to. I like to resize row 3 to 6. That way there's a little bit of a border in between my header columns and my data set, but not too much of one. I like to resize the column to the left to 25. And then I like to remove excess columns over here. So I'm going to resize this to 25 as well. Cool. I'm also going to resize this row to 30. And then I am going to use the vertical line to center it. And then I'm going to hold down Shift Command E, and I'm going to center all of those. And I am going to make them bold. Additionally, I'm going to highlight C and D, and I'm also going to hold down Shift Command E, and I'm going to center those. What I'm going to do as well is I'm going to turn inventory into a number, and then I am going to turn the revenue figures into dollar amounts. I am going to add in lines, so like border lines in here. And what I'm going to do is for my outer border, I'm going to select on the outer border, and then I'm going to make it heavier than the rest of the data in there. I like to do that just as kind of like, I just think it looks good. Again, you can do whatever you want to. And then I do it for the top header up here. And then I'm going to go into these, and I'm going to select all borders because I want all of these to be boxed off and heavier than the rest of my data set. I'm going to highlight the data, so I'm going to do Shift Command right arrow, Shift Command down arrow, and then I'm going to go into alternate colors. And I typically just do a gray with like a dominant header and then white and light gray, just so that it kind of like catches the eye in here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a conditional formatting so that we can dynamically identify the header row. I don't know why it defaults to this green color. I don't know who's using this green color, but that's what they do. So we're going to go to Format Cells If, and we're going to change it from is not empty to custom formula is. We're going to use an equal sign. We're going to use a dollar sign, and then we're going to reference column B, 4, and we're going to say equals, and then we're going to do double quote, month. And now what you'll see is we are dynamically highlighting all of the rows in the range of B4 through E33 that say month. We're going to change that gross green color to that dark gray that we use in our headers, and then we're going to bold them, and we're going to hit done, and then we're going to hit exit. And now I want you to see if we change this to 2019. So if you'll recall, this query up top here, our top query that's calculating the month, or sorry, not the month, the year, dynamically changes, right? Because it'll only give you the last 3 most recent. So when you go into 2020, for example, there are less than 3 available. So then that month row moves up. So if we had stylized month as being in row 8 when it was for 2022, we would have just had it be row 8, which would have resulted in the next line item that bumps up, being highlighted that way or formatted in that way. Now, because we're using a custom formula in our conditional formatting, if we go back in time to a point where there's less years than available, we will dynamically adjust and respond to it. Cool. So one of the last style things we're going to do is we're going to highlight B2, and we're going to hold down Command, highlight D2, F2, H2, and we are going to go to our paint bucket and style them in those grays. We're going to scroll down here. We don't need all these rows. We're going to do Shift Command down arrow, Control click, and delete those rows. And then we're going to go up top into View, and we are going to go to Show, and we're going to get rid of the grid lines. And now you can see we have this nice, clean visualization of our data that enables us to explore a lot of information at the click of a button. And we can just kind of like change our menus up here if we want to. We can flip through our markets, and we can flip through our names. Now we do have one problem that we haven't solved yet, which is when you select a name and you select a country, as long as that name appears in that country, you will get results. However, if that name does not appear in that country, you get no data. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use Google Apps Script in order to adjust this for us. So we're going to go into the extensions menu and we're going to go into App Script. Now, we haven't talked about App Script yet in my videos. Depending upon when you're watching this, I may have no videos about App Script, or I may have a whole series of videos on App Script. So depending upon what the reaction is to this video and my other videos will help me determine, what I put out there effectively. So what we're going to do is move through this rather quickly, and then I'll have resources that will build this out, or I won't. Fortunately, there's a lot of great resources about App Script out there, so you can learn more about this if you want to. So we're going to begin by declaring a constant that I call app. The nice thing about variables, or the thing about variables, is you can name them whatever you want to, right? So when I say const and then I put app there, you could name it whatever you want to. You could call it button, you could call it pen, you could call it whatever. You can name it whatever you want to. So what we're going to do is we're going to call the spreadsheet app, and we're going to get the active spreadsheet. And we're going to add a semicolon, because that's the syntax of app script. We're going to add another constant that I'm going to call, or a constant that I call sheet, and that is going to reference our app variable, or our app constant, and it's going to say get sheet by name, and we're going to get the dashboard tab. Now, this is where it's really important about how you name your tabs, right? So if you name it dashboard and then you change it, you're going to have to go into your app script and you're going to have to change that name as well. We're going to change this function name to be called onEdit, and we're going to pass in an E. And what that's going to enable us to do is write an if statement, and then we're going to do a parentheses, and we're going to say e.range.get sheet .get name equal to dashboard, because that's the name of the sheet that we want to reference. We're going to use 2 ampersands in order to activate a second conditional in our if, where we say if the edited range, and then we're going to use get A1 notation equals C2, then we're going to stick in the condition that we want our if statement to do. So then we're going to reference our sheet, which is dashboard, and we're going to say get range, and we're going to reference the second column, or the second row, 5th column. We're going to say set value to all. I'm going to name my project menu adjuster. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to save it. I'm going to run it. Tap dancing music while it runs. What happens is when you use app script, you have to give it permissions. So I'm going to go in here, go to advanced, go to menu adjuster unsafe, click allow. All of these things are merely just allowing you to edit your environment. So I guess we have to do that again. I don't know why it's being finicky. Cool. So the reason it's doing this is because onEdit is an onEdit function, right? So like if an edit happens, then it'll run, but you can't trigger it without an edit. But we just needed to do that so that we could get permission to our spreadsheet. So what'll happen now is when I change this, hopefully when I change this name here should turn into all. So I'm going to change it back to Canada. It'll run, but you can see it adjusted the name to all, right? So we're going to go in here. We're going to pick a new name. We're going to go to United States. It errors out, and then it resets to all. So let's break down what happened in our script just so that we can kind of talk about it. we need to access the spreadsheet app. That basically is the thing that builds a spreadsheet for you. So like anytime you go to your Drive app and you select spreadsheet or document or whatever, the code in the background is accessing the spreadsheet app in order to create a spreadsheet. So we're saying spreadsheet app get the active spreadsheet. The active spreadsheet is because this script is bound to our, what is right now our untitled spreadsheet. We're using that variable app to get the sheet by name, right? So we're referencing the dashboard sheet in here. So then this is the sheet that we're pointing to anytime that we use the variable sheet. We're creating a function that works on an onEdit. So anytime that the range, meaning any of the cells in dashboard sheet, gets adjusted, the onEdit function will make sure that the name of the edit happened in dashboard and that the edit happened in cell C2, right? So what happens is like, check it out, right? We can move these sheets over here and it's not going to change the contents of E2, right? So like what's happening right now is the spreadsheet is logging that edits are happening. But because the edit is not happening in cell C2 of the dashboard tab, nothing is happening to cell E2, right? And this is important because if we just like make a fake tab in here, right? And we say, hello, I'm making edits, nothing happened in here. But the second that we make an edit in C2 of our dashboard tab, our onEdit function is triggered because the conditions of our if statement are being met. Because an edit is made, that's what this E stands for. It's saying the edit is in the range and the name is dashboard and the cell is C2. When those conditions are met, we are referencing sheet, which is the variable up here that is referencing the dashboard tab. We're then looking for the range of row 2, right? So this 2 here is referencing the row. The 5 is referencing the column. So let's go back to our sheet. This is row 1. This is row 2. Column A is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the name cell, right? So in our, like when we approach this spreadsheet, we're thinking about this as cell E2. When AppScript is approaching that spreadsheet, it's thinking about it as row 2, column 5. And then we're using the set value operator in order to define that we wanted to put all in there. So the reason that all gets written in here is because we put it into single quotes, and set value enables us to write to the range that we want to, which in this case is range row 2, column 5. So that's it, everybody. That's how you can build a dynamic dashboard in Google Sheets. Again, you should name it dashboard build number 1. And within your project folder, I would also recommend creating a text document and formatting it as dashboard build number 1. And then you could say it like explained. And then this is just my personal formatting. You know, if people are interested, I can do a whole video on documentation. But typically I do it like this. And then I'll provide a brief description of what I did, how I did it, why I did it, who it's for, how to update it, all that type of stuff. And then what you'll have is this nice project folder that you can share with people and say, here's my documentation, here's my dashboard, here's how you update it, here's how you run it, so on and so forth. Cool. So the description is going to have links out to videos that dive deeper into a lot of the functions and the methods that we use today. It's also going to link out to the data set so that you can build this along with us. I hope you found this helpful. Pretty much I've built my channel to this point where all of my videos culminated in this dashboard build. So I love getting feedback. I hope you found it helpful. I hope this makes data analysis and visualization and exploration more accessible to you. Please reach out with any thoughts, and I wish you luck on your data journey.